Thank you. Wow, it always is, it's unnerving to hear your bio because you're like, oh crap, do I have to live up to that? So, good morning. It is early, and I am excited to be here. I will say that I'll live behind this sometimes, but I'm an educator, and so it's hard for me to stay behind things. So thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. And I will say that it's one of my joys to get to speak to people who have an opportunity to impact campus. Most of the time, I get to speak to students. Yesterday, actually the last 2 days, I was with Dr. Kathy Aubert doing a training at St. John's University for, they're doing a train the trainer of helping people across campus get more skills to be able to really share and become inclusion practitioners. We'll talk about that in a second on their campus. And so I don't ever, I won't say I never, but I don't get to talk to 5 presidents at least at one time. So this is a big deal. I'm like, I'm getting to impact across the campus. Students, staff, faculty, presidents, all we need is the board of trustees, and I have hit a home run. So I am overjoyed. I worked in higher education for 20 plus years, really, doing diversity and inclusion work. And about 2-3 years ago, I decided that I really just wanted to go talk to people about social justice and oppression. I wanted us to engage, and honestly, it was part of, I didn't want to sit in another meeting where we talked about talking about social justice and oppression. I wanted to go engage. I wanted to really talk about what it's going to take for us to not have to sit in another meeting. And so this morning, that's where I'm going. And I'm going to believe that what I was given to share will be of use to you. And we'll have some time to do some conversation afterwards. But it is a joy for me to get to engage and connect with people on these issues. So like I said, I worked in higher education for 20 years, and most recently I was at the Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York, and I worked as the vice president for institutional diversity and community engagement. And I'd sit in these meetings with the president and other vice presidents, and I would often wonder, I'd ask all of these questions like, was any of the work that we were doing actually, was it ever going to make a difference? Were we going to actually see that difference on our campus? And we were in the middle of New York. We still are in the middle of New York. I no longer am there. But was the campus going to feel different, even in the space where all of this diversity happened? Our diversity was not right where we wanted it, and our engagement was not right where we wanted it. Were we going to feel the difference in the way that campus responded to all of the things that would show up both inside of campus and outside of campus? Were we actually ever going to feel that? Were we ever going to have a moment where it didn't feel like groups of students were fighting each other? And even more so, were we going to ever have a moment where we felt like, as administrators, we were not at odds with students? How many people feel like that sometimes? I know I'm not alone. I can't be. Okay. And were we ever going to feel like all of our students could consider our campus the safe and hospitable place that we wanted it to be? I don't know that I can answer all of those questions for you this morning for each of your campuses, but I am going to maybe challenge us to think about, are those the right questions? So during the last 10 months, and I specifically say 10 months on purpose, think about it. 10 months since then, and really months before that and years before that, I will peruse Facebook, social media, and I'll often, and be in conversations, and people will say, I can't believe it's 2017. How many people have said that? Okay, you all are on my bad list. Because, yes, indeed, it's 2017. And that's, you're not really on my bad list, come on. But what I will say is, we act like in 2017, we've transported ourselves to this magical place where none of this stuff exists anymore. And we act like we've done all of the work that is necessary for us to be living a different kind of experience. And I'm going to put forth this morning that we actually have not done that work. So when I hear people say, I can't believe it's 2017, it's like it's 2017 because we actually haven't been doing that much different than we were 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And that, you know, I will say, I hear in my head that people might be thinking, wow, that's a bummer way to start. It's like you're telling us that we're not doing any work. And I wanted to be honest, and I want us to hold this in perspective and be in a place of reality around it. And so to help us get an understanding of why 2017 actually is 2017 and we're still facing the same things, I am going to use myself and my ancestry as an example. So we have a bit of a timeline here, and started in 1619. That was when the first slaves, or the first enslaved people from Africa were used and brought to the colonies. And so slavery lasted all of this time. Then we had that short little piece of Reconstruction. Y'all didn't know that y'all are going to get a history lesson this morning. Short little piece of Reconstruction after the Civil Rights, after the Emancipation Proclamation, where folks were free. There was laws that spoke to people's freedoms. And I can remember learning in 5th grade about Reconstruction, and we'll get into this in a little later rather, about what this was. But I can remember being in 5th grade and hearing about Reconstruction, and when I was in 5th grade, I think it was like 1980, 82, there were no black senators, or there was no Barack Obama. And I remember sitting in 5th grade, and I thought, because the history books talked about, you know, there were black senators in the United States. And I sat there in 5th grade and thought, that can't be right. That's impossible. And then, and internalized racism, we'll talk about a little bit more. I thought, oh, that's actually why it didn't last, because there were black people. So I'm giving you this story for a reason. So Reconstruction happened. This is Tanya's brain in 5th grade is thinking there's no way Reconstruction could work because black people were senators, and you know, take that in for a second. Then we have Jim Crow, which we know that slavery introduced, it was by law. Jim Crow reintroduced the bylaw of the separation and segregation of slavery. And then we got civil rights. And so we're in an era of civil rights from 1964 to 2017. I put this up here to help us get that was 345 years. Get that in your mind, 345 years. And yes, Reconstruction was in there for a second, but I'm going to come back to that story about being that 5th grader. It has been 53 years. 53 years since all of this has happened. I'm 45, so that's over most of my lifetime. But we know that as our country was built with all of this stuff, and this is just around enslaved African American ancestry, not to think about all of the other ethnic groups and racial groups and gender groups and sexual orientation and class. We're just looking at one racial group. We have been built on 345 years of oppression. And so for us to think that in 2017, that everything's going to be better all of a sudden because we did a couple of programs, we're fooling ourselves. And what I want to offer this morning is that it's actually not the programs that's going to make the difference. It is the work that we actually have to do within. So, okay, if no one had their coffee this morning, you just got it. I kind of started pretty like, okay, you didn't know you're going to be talking about slavery at 9 a.m. But I promise you it gets lighter from here. So we have to realize that the same things that we've been doing on campus, the same thoughts that we've been having, it's working. We're getting different numbers. We're getting different diversity numbers of racial groups and class groups. We're having that show up differently on campus. But the reality is we still have incidents that stem from ignorance and hate that make our campuses and our world feel unsafe. For LGBTQ folks, for gender nonconforming folks, we still have buildings whose doors and classrooms are quite literally closed off to people with physical disabilities. One of the things that I noticed, and Kathy noticed, in the building that we were training in the past 2 days, the building was, I think, actually it had been redone because the rooms were nice, there was new carpet, it was beautiful. But in order to get to the bathroom, to any of the restrooms, you either had to go up some stairs or you had to go through a door that did not have a way to help you open it. And so it literally, we talked about it with the group, that if you had a physical disability and needed the assistance of door assist, there was no way for you to get to the bathroom. How many times have we seen this? And on my campus at Union Theological Seminary, in order to get to my office, I'm the institutional diversity person. In order to get to my office, you had to climb stairs. There was no other way to get there. It's these things that are still, we can create program and policies, but it's when we're overlooking some of the simple things, we're still not creating spaces that are open and hospitable. We still have Islamophobia and ableism that leaves valuable voices out of discussions and campaigns for change. And we have to recognize that our old ways won't open new doors. So my container garden in New York, it recently taught me a story, a lesson about this. So my partner and I live in Harlem. If you've ever visited New York, we're in Manhattan, towards the north of Manhattan. And we live on the 12th floor of a 12-story building. And so we have this really nice roof garden space above our apartment. And when we moved in May 2016, I was like, yes, finally. My mom's a gardener. My grandfather had a whole backyard was a garden. And so I'm like, I get to show my gardening chops. I'm going to actually grow something, albeit in containers, but I'm going to grow something and I'm going to feel like a Harris Williams child finally. So moved in, month, the owner we rent the apartment, so the owner had put trees on the garden, on the roof garden, had a whole bunch of pots, like I'm ready to get in. A month after we moved in, the building management decided, oh, we're going to do some facade work, so going to throw cranes off the side of the building so that we can do some work on the building. And we're going to use your roof to have those cranes on it. So I was like, okay, cool. I can let that go. not this year, it's all right. And so I waited a year. I watered the trees, but I saw those pots just waiting for me. So last spring, in probably March of 2016, really busy time for consulting, training, lots of conferences. April, I wasn't able to get in. They took the cranes off about February. They had finished the work, and I was like, I could get in there. Couldn't get in March, couldn't get it in April. May came, stuff started growing. And finally, in June, I was able to get back out there and dig my hands in the dirt and start to plant. When I got out there, I ended up spending 10 hours for 2 days in a row clearing out weeds and roots and trying to think about what are the plants that I want to plant. I realized that, one, I didn't have the skill. I didn't know much about gardening. I watched my mother garden, I watched my grandfather garden, but I didn't have much of the skill myself. And so I had to learn some new ideas. And then, because I had gone a year without touching really any of those plants, they had overgrown. And the roots had started to weave themselves and dig, not just around themselves, but they had started to dig into the containers themselves. And so I'm faced with all of these roots and this land in pots that I really wanted to get into. And I had to pull out some new tools that I actually didn't know what I was doing with them. I was stabbing at roots, trying to break them up. I was, digging. I had no idea what I was doing. But I learned the lesson that it wasn't just pulling weeds, but I actually had to get in there. And I ended up having to use some new tools that I wasn't quite sure were going to work, but I tried them anyway. So when I do my workshops, and actually the truth is when I do my keynotes, they're more like workshops, because I'm an educator. I am a person who likes to share information, engage people. I'm an educator and facilitator. This will be a lot like a workshop. It'll be a little bit less movement. It'll be a little less, talking. You all will talk to each other, so I'm just warming you up right now. You will talk to each other. But I wanted to pattern this keynote a little bit after my workshops, because what is true is that the new ways that we need to open new doors actually is the work that we need to do on ourselves. It's not one more program. It's not one more policy that we can write. Those things are wonderful. They are absolutely wonderful. But the thing that I feel like, if I could go back to that slide of the history, the thing that I feel like is so often missing in the United States when we do this work is that we haven't actually done the individual work to have those policies and those programs actually mean something. And so I'm going to challenge you to really use courage, leadership, and resilience today, and we'll break those down. I'm going to encourage you and challenge you to use those to actually do the work. So you won't hear a lot of statistics from me today. I didn't feel like I needed to bring out a lot of statistics because I imagine the people who are doing the diversity work on your campus already do that. You're not going to hear me say that diversity and social justice is a good idea, because honestly, if we don't know that by now, we are in worse shape than we realize. Diversity, and I train with a lot of corporations and nonprofits. Sometimes I am in a place of trying to convince them that diversity is a good idea. It's the business case for diversity. Diversity in higher education, we should know that by now. We should know that our institutions are stronger, our institutions are richer, our institutions are the places where people want to be when they see difference available to them. Now, it's like, what are we doing with that difference? And so honestly, statistics aren't my style because I don't think that they're always telling us what we need to know. I am so first of all, anybody who's in science, the science world, I am not saying that numbers are not important. I am a qualitative researcher, and so I am all into what can I learn from the stories? What can I learn from what people have to share? And numbers can tell us something, but the reality is they leave out a significant part of the story. They might be great to measure the outcomes that we're striving for, but they don't tell us when we're striving to realize the wrong outcome or why the programs or policies that we've put in place aren't working or producing the outcomes that we want. And even further, we know that achieving numbers doesn't mean that we're realizing the equity agenda. Our agenda for realizing equity is much more than just numbers. It's climate on campus. It's the way that students, staff, and faculty feel when they are on campus engaging. And it's the way that each of us is able to engage, support, celebrate, and make space for and stand up for difference. It takes more than numbers to tell us all of that. So, when I decided that I wasn't going to do a whole bunch of statistics for you this morning, I decided to ask another question. What if we're looking to the wrong people to even give us data on if we're realizing our equity agenda? What if we, in our want to measure statistics, we're looking at the students, we're looking at the number of faculty or staff on campus, and we're not actually, those aren't the people we should be looking for data. Another question came to me was, what if we're looking for the wrong outcomes to tell us if we're realizing our equity agenda? I'm going to suggest today that the people that we should be looking for data is actually right here, not Tanya, but the individual self that sits in each one of those seats. The data that you are able to give yourself is actually going to tell you if we are realizing the equity agenda. And what if we're looking for the wrong outcomes? Maybe it's not the numbers that we should be looking for. And this is all just theory at this point, with a little bit of proven science. What if the outcomes that we need to be searching for is how we show up in conversations? What if it is the relationships that we have with people on our campus that are different from us? What if it's the ways in which our meetings are run, or our dialogues are had, or the ways in which our alumni contribute to different programs? I'm going to ask for us to ask some different questions. The question, it can be, there might be an answer, but it's not the whole answer of, are our numbers looking like we want them to? I want us to ask the question, am I able to be in this conversation about diversity, inclusion, and social justice in a way where I feel grounded, purposeful, and knowledgeable? Do I have resilience, or am I constantly talking about, I'm too tired to talk about this stuff anymore? Have we developed our leadership around being able to have these conversations in ways that will be meaningful? So, as I said, we're going to look at courage, leadership, and resilience. And I'm going to talk about a couple of ways in each of those that we can begin to look for data in ourselves. So let's talk first about courage. It's my belief that part of the courage we need is we need to have courage to have a vision that goes beyond the numbers. We have to have a courage to have a vision that goes beyond race, that goes beyond the status quo. So 2 more questions. I talked about my workshops. 2 more questions that I usually ask all participants is, what is your vision of an inclusive, and you can fill in the blank for your school, university or college? I was just at Barnard College in New York on Tuesday, and I was talking to their student life staff at their student life division, and I asked them this question. And it was a wonderful conversation, because once you ask that question, you realize, oh, we actually don't have the same vision. And so if we don't have the same vision, it's no matter that we are kind of all over the place. So what is your vision for your campus? What is your vision for an inclusive, not a diverse, and we'll talk about the difference between diversity and inclusion in a second, but an inclusive, and I would forward that, a socially just college or university? What is your vision for that? So that's one question I always ask folks. The second question I always ask is, what do you want to contribute to this training, and what do you want to leave this training with today? And I ask that from a place of, what's the energy that you're bringing to this work? So you have your vision. We've set up and clarified that this is what I envision when it comes to having an inclusive campus. What is the energy from which I'm going to do that work to achieve that vision? And that's about intention. I think it is massively important for us to get clear about our intention for doing this work. Is our intention about being the school that has the best numbers? That can be an intention. I'm not going to say that it will be the intention that is going to sustain you very long. Is it your intention to be socially just, to create a space where every single student that walks on that campus feels like they are seen, heard, and appreciated? Every single person that walks into your classroom feels like they are seen, heard, and appreciated, that their voice matters, that their very being matters. What's your intention that you bring to this work? And getting clear about that intention and actually telling some truth around that intention actually might transform the way you do your work, the way you approach the conversations. So the other piece that I always kind of go into is understanding the difference between diversity, which I think is what we're going off after with numbers. When we can measure and count people, we're looking at diversity, versus the feeling of the campus, the climate and culture of the campus, versus a larger vision of what I actually think not just our campuses, but every single person in this world actually wants, which is social justice. So I always start with diversity. Diversity is very simple. It is the difference that exists. So that difference can be all of these things like race and ethnicity and gender and sexual orientation and ability and religious and spiritual beliefs. And it can be so much more than that. Veteran status, hierarchy on campus. We were just talking about on the last 2 days, criminal background. That's diversity as well. Those are things that people bring into our campuses and universities. We've got to be able to look and understand diversity at its breadth. If we are only, and I do that on purpose, only focusing on race, we are missing so much. And I am not saying that race is not important. You saw that I started with a history lesson on slavery in the United States. So race is super important. And if we don't extend the breadth, we're actually not getting to our equity agendas at all. So that's diversity. Then we talk about inclusion. And I like to call myself the Pied Piper of social justice, if you will, in the sense that I came of age, I started this work 1992, I would say. I was probably a sophomore, junior in college, and really started presenting and doing workshops. And I've watched multiculturalism become diversity, become inclusion, and I'm watching it become social justice. And they are not the same things. And if you take nothing else away, please don't use those interchangeably, because you're watering down the beauty of social justice. And we're going to get to, I'm kind of building it up for a reason. We're going to get to why social justice is so beautiful. But inclusion is not diversity. It's not about having more people that look different on your campus. Texas A&M, I was one of those folks. I didn't integrate Texas A&M, but I was in the generation right behind the integrators. I was the student who got to campus and who was told, you're only here because of affirmative action. And I know that is still happening on campus. So I'm not fooled that it only happened in 1990 and it's not happening anymore. I know that Texas A&M needed me. There were 43,000 students on that campus at the time that I was there. There were 1,089 African American and Black students. And so I know they needed me to diversify their campus. I know they needed me. I know they needed the numbers. I got into Texas A&M because my grades were good, and I graduated because I survived the campus. But for a school to be stuck only, I know that Texas A&M is not stuck there anymore because I've gotten to do work with them. Schools that, though, are still stuck at let's diversify without thinking about what that diversity has to become and what the space has to be when the diversity is on campus, is doing a disservice not only to the institution, but it's doing a disservice to the school, to the students themselves. And so inclusion is more than the diversity. It is truly about engaging with the diversity and moving beyond the celebration that the diversity there, and know that when we say the diversity, it is usually about race. And we gotta, again, think more than that. But beyond celebrating and understanding that the diversity is present, to moving to how do we actually create the integration of that diversity. So integration of people's identities, their knowledge, their skills, their beliefs, their practices, all of those things actually means inclusion. And so it's great to have a space and have a campus where your numbers are going up. But if those students don't feel like they have a space there, they won't stay. Your numbers won't actually be up for very long because they want to bring their whole selves. And in not bringing them their whole selves, if they're not allowed to do that, you're actually not getting the benefit of that diversity. That diversity is, I think about it, think back to my Sunday school and Baptist upbringing, that I'm going to get it wrong, and so Bible scholars in the room, forgive me. You don't want to keep your light under a bushel. That's what ends up happening when students don't get to bring their whole selves to campus. You're not getting the full light of the very being that they have brought with them. So, yes, we want diversity. Yes, we want inclusion. And that's what we can strive for. But I sincerely believe that we want equity, and more than that, we want social justice. I want to show you that equality is not the same thing as equity. Equality is about fairness, and fairness is good. I'm not giving fairness a hard time. It's not always, though, about being fair. It's about recognizing that the system and the context that we live in, that we have experienced in those 345 years and so much more with so many other groups, that everybody's needs are not the same. And so when we do equality and the fairness and giving everybody the same, it means that people still are in stratified places because we didn't actually start in the same place because of that history and those years. What we're going for is equity, and is giving everyone what they actually need to succeed. And I want to push forward because you've probably seen this image, and it's a simple way to help us understand the difference. So you have your boxes, people want to see the baseball game, equality, everybody gets the same box, everybody doesn't have the same needs. Equity, everybody gets the boxes that they need. But I want to push forward because social justice, I think, is where we actually want to be. And it's not just, those aren't just two words that we kind of want to put together. So my doctorate degree is from UMass Amherst in the Social Justice Education Program in our Department of Education. And this definition of social justice is actually the definition that I was trained on by our faculty. And I think that that's partially why I consider myself the Pied Piper of social justice or a social justice purist, is because this is what I believe we actually want on our campuses, what we want in our world, because there's no question that we actually would all benefit from it. So the definition that my faculty and now I use is that social justice is a process, a process and a goal. The goal of social justice is the full and equal participation of all groups in society that is mutually shaped to meet their needs. Social justice includes a vision of society in which the distribution of resources is equitable and all members are physically and psychologically safe and secure. I always have to say that last part again. A distribution of resources is equitable and all members are physically and psychologically safe and secure. I don't know about you, but that always gets me. And I use this definition all the time, but it always gets me because I recognize the ways in which so many of us move through this world not feeling safe and not feeling secure. Physically or psychologically. And for a world, for us, and this is why I don't want it to get watered down, for us to go after a world where every single person feels physically and psychologically safe and secure, that's the world, that's the fight that I want. That's worth getting up for. That's worth landing at 11 p.m. and waking up at 6 to stand here in front of you to go after. That's the world that I want. And I think that that's the world actually that we're seeking. We're not seeking numbers. I keep going back to the numbers give us some information, but what's our vision? So that's just the goal. I love that my faculty pushes forward and says there is also a process to this. We have to be socially just as we are moving towards social justice. The process for social justice should also be democratic and participatory, inclusive and affirming of human agency and human capacity for working collaboratively to create change. And so I think of it as, I watched a lot of cartoons as a child. I love cartoons. I don't know what it was. Bugs Bunny was my guy. But there's this image in my mind of Bugs Bunny, a cartoon where he has this hat on, and there's this long stick, and there's this carrot hanging from the stick. And I think of this definition of the process piece of social justice like that cartoon. That if social justice, the goal is that carrot, if we do not practice being socially just, practice in these ways, inclusive, affirming, seeing human capacities and uplifting them, our striving for the goal of social justice will be just like Bugs Bunny going after that carrot. He will constantly chase it, and it'll constantly be out in front of him. but he'll never get there because we will not have practiced the process. And so it really is about, and have been doing some work with the radio program, The Moth. I love the work that they do in the world, and I love that they are working to look at the ways that they can be more diverse and they can have more diverse stories. But what we've been talking about with their staff is, yes, you can strive to be, to practice, go after that social justice goal, but you have to also be socially just. They're together. So that's our piece around, oh, I forgot I had this in here. So the other piece, this is good. So you got equality, you got equity. Liberation, we also use that language interchangeably sometimes with social justice. You notice what's missing in that picture. And actually, I think there's another slide that actually would show another piece of liberation. So the fence is missing. So we're not even held back from stuff. There's nothing that is standing between us and an opportunity to participate. And if there was another slide there, I would love, and I've seen it this way, that it's a completely blank sheet of paper, that we actually get to be self-determining in our work, in our very being. So what if I don't even actually want to be at the game? What if baseball is not my thing? That's what we're talking about. People get to be self-determining, and that is the world, not only that I want to go after, I know that it's possible. So that is the courage piece. We have to be courageous in our vision setting. We have to be courageous to really understand that we're stepping outside of the status quo. We have to be courageous in understanding the difference between what we're going after. So let's talk about leadership. So leadership, I work with an organization, it was in my bio, I work with an organization called Leadership. People may have heard of it. It is a national organization, it's been around since 1986, and primarily where it started was that they really work with people leading with integrity. We do 6-Day Institute's wonderful, wonderful program. I highly encourage you to look it up. I learned my definition of leadership from Leadership, and their definition is much longer than what I'm going to give you, but basically their definition of leadership says that leadership actually has nothing to do with position. Position is actually not the highlight of leadership. Leadership actually has the most to do with people living in line with their values. Their actions match the values. So it's the integrity. When I can bring myself as a person to a room and live in with my values, I am actually being a leader. So I want to have that be part of the definition that we work with when we talk about leadership. Leadership really is about being able to, and the way that we're going to talk about it, or the way that I'm going to talk about it, is being able to be a leader that thinks about how you lead, how you more so create a container of trust on your campus around these issues. And what do I mean by a container of trust? I mean you actually are building a space, an atmosphere, a way of being that is going to support the inclusion and is going to move us towards the social justice. These are the guidelines that I share in almost every workshop that I do. And I use them as guidelines. So being from Texas, and you all may know this, because I live in New York, there are hardly any fences in the way that there are fences in Texas. But I thought about, when we use the language of guidelines, in Texas, guidelines really are about creating a guideline for a fence, in the sense of that it's there. It is not the fence itself. It is the lines, the guidelines that you're trying to set up to get your fence to be straight. And so what I know, not that I've built a lot of fences, I don't know why, as if I have a ranch, I don't. But what I do know is that when people are building fences and have set up their guidelines, sometimes the fence bumps up against the guideline. It's not perfectly straight all the time. And so when I do my workshops, I help people understand that these are the things that we are setting up to kind of create this space and container of trust, but we may bump up into them sometimes. But they're there to help us have the conversation. They're there for us to be able to engage our differences with respect. And so to go over them really quickly, obviously, bring yourself, as you do this work, participate honestly and fully. That's going to make the change. If I show up in my fullness, there's a quote that was attributed to Nelson Mandela. It was actually Marianne Williamson that talks about when we show up in our fullness, I'm paraphrasing and slightly changing the words, when we show up in our fullness, we allow, that creates space for others to show up in their fullness. So participate honestly and fully in this conversation. Use I statements. Speak from what you know, which is what you know, your identity, your beliefs, your background, and speak from that place. Be open to new and different perspectives. It's a given. Diversity is present. That perspective might not be my perspective, and I need to be open to it. Respect and maintain confidentiality. As we do this work, that's where trust is actually built. If someone is vulnerable enough and trusting enough to share their story with you, allow it to be their story. Ask for permission before you move forward and retell it. But that's where we build trust. If we don't have that in workshops, if we don't have that in our work, that is actually where the trust gets broken down. And more so from the respect and maintain confidentiality is I don't have to tell someone else's story in order for me to tell the learning that I received from it. And so yes, go and share all that you can about how you took that in and what you learned. But leave someone's story with them. We got to take risks. I loved, and I'm going to bring this in, I had a great conversation this morning with Kate as we drove from the hotel. And I appreciated Kate's ability to say and name and live her life in the way of, I'm willing to take the risk because I know, there's learning. Whether I get it like perfectly right and it turns out the way that I want, or if it doesn't, there's learning. I might as well take the risk because otherwise I'm not really learning. So take the risk as we do this work. Share their airtime. I may know a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't have to say it all the time. And sometimes when I don't know as much stuff, I need to move forward and take the risk to say, I either don't know or this is what I know. More often than not, I hear and I struggle with it sometimes because I know it's a scary place to be. I'm going to talk about race here for a second. That I watch in conversations about race, I watch white people sit back and say, I want to learn, I want to listen. There is learning available in the speaking as well. There is learning available for everyone if we take the risk to say that we don't know or to say that this is what I do know or this is what my experience is. But we don't actually have to sit back. I know in my privileged identity of being Christian, I remember a friend of mine, Eric, who's a Jewish man. He was very visual and verbal and outspoken about his Jewish identity. And one day he called out Christian hegemony that was happening in our graduate program. And he started sending all of these emails to the listserv. And in my Christian privilege identity, I was like, Eric, I need you, be quiet. You don't have to say so much. Or I would say, well, I just want to sit back and listen. Or I don't want to get in this conversation because if I do get in this conversation, I'm going to show all of the ignorance that I have. We do have ignorance. We can't have that history experience and not have ignorance. So I surely did make a fool of myself. I said some stuff that was not, that was probably anti-Semitic, that was ignorant, that was based in my lens of my Christianity that I had learned my whole life. And only when I stated that was Eric, who I had built a relationship with and a friendship with, able to say, so Tanya, I need you to know that this right here, what you said, doesn't work so well. Which then took me to, oh, I need to go read some more. I need to learn some more because I have some gaps in knowledge. So move up, move back in the conversation, speak up. Embrace literacy moments. I love this because sadly in our country we have gotten to the space around social justice that we want to shame people when they don't know. And it hurts my heart. We all don't know. There's no way for all of us to know everything. And so I want to create a space, and I hope that you want to create a space on your campuses that not knowing is absolutely okay and we don't have to have shame about it. Instead, I can say that I don't know and I need some literacy around this. I don't have to sit in silence and not know. I don't have to sit in shame and not know. I know that there is wisdom in this room, on this campus, in this world, and so I can say we can embrace those literacy moments of, I don't know. Assume good intentions and recognize the impact. We all have good intentions, but if I step on someone's foot and I'm like, I didn't mean to, they still got a hurt foot. So I can have the best of intentions, and I've got to recognize the impact that I have. And then, of course, actively listen. And so, courage. Practicing these in the midst of our leadership, not about the position, but really about the way of being on our campuses. We also want to be able to explore our identity as leaders and understanding that identity goes into all of the ways in which our social groups are constructed. So the race, the gender, the class, the sexual orientation, understanding the way that each one of those identities shows up in us. I don't believe that we can be good or effective leaders around equity, agendas, or realizing social justice if we have not done this work. And so this is almost as part of every workshop, unless I've done a series of workshops, this is going to be part of the work. Because people have to be able to talk from their identities. We have to be able to speak from what we understand and know. And so getting clear about what social groups we are members of are going to help us be better leaders. And then we have to understand the dynamics of power and privilege. And this, honestly, can be a rabbit hole for me, so if I go down the rabbit hole, pull me back out. And I say it could be a rabbit hole because it's intricate, it's interconnected, it is truly like a web. And I don't think it was purposefully built that way, but it can be at times confusing. So I just want to help us understand that social identity can build, because of our histories and power, into discrimination and individual power, the ways in which we hold rights, resources, And sometimes we can discriminate, not knowing it. But then we get this thing called social power, which really is the access to resources to enhance one's life's chances of getting what they want to succeed and live a fulfilling life. When we combine that with the history that we have, which has created that social power, with discrimination, we end up with what we call oppression. And we all know about oppression. We all know that it is something that we are all living in the midst of, and because of the way that the system has been created, based on our social identities, some of us have more advantage or privilege or have a higher card. Kathy talks about it, Kathy O'Bear talks about it as a high card or a low card. Those are the dynamics that we're seeing on our campuses. That's what we're actually trying to fight. That's why when we think about the numbers not being why they're not where we want them to be, it's because of oppression. And as leaders, if we don't understand how oppression works, we will consistently and forever be going after the wrong thing. We've got to understand the beast that we're working with. And hear me when I say, it is the beast that we are challenging, the beast of oppression, and it is not the people. It's not the individuals. And I think so many people get caught up in, well, folks are angry or mad or raging against me, or oppression actually is destroying all of us. It's making us all suffer. And I know this because I'll use the example of my nephew. My nephew is a college student, he's a sophomore in college now. And he's a wonderful young man, but as a child, I can remember babysitting him and just so loving and so connected, and we'd have so much fun. He got older, 9, 10 years old, still very loving and hugging and kissing, and it was nothing for him to show affection. And as a college-age student, hey, what's up? And I'm like, I know you have a bigger heart in there, but that heart has been beat out of you by this society. And so you might look at him, and granted, he is a black man, and so there are other situations he has to deal with around race but as a male, he has a lot of power in society. And yet, he is not able to access his full humanness. And so I know it's hurting all of us. It's hurting both groups that are marginalized by oppression and the groups who are privileged and advantaged by oppression. And so I'm not fighting individuals. I'm not mad actually at anybody in this room. I don't actually even know what you've done. What I'm mad at is oppression. I'm heartless angry at the system that has actually taken our humanity away from us. And so, as a leader, I don't want to get stuck in saying, okay, I have my numbers right, or no, this group is wrong and that group is right. I want actually all of us to recognize as a leader that we have to fight oppression. And that's what we've got to do. It's not about us getting angry. It's not about us ostracizing one group or another. It's about ostracizing oppression. So a way to understand the way that the system works, and people teach classes on this. I heard a sociology professor probably taught a class on this, so this is going to be a quick and dirty version. But our identities correspond to if we have power or if we have less power, and each of those identities have an oppression attached to it. And so as leaders, we have to understand how not just race and racism works, but how all of these oppressions manifest. Because they could be manifesting in some of the work that we think is actually making change, but it may actually be hurting someone else. And we have to understand that it is happening on different levels. That there is a structural level of everything that the ideology that we have in our country kind of holds it all in place. Institutionally, so education, media, all of those things have oppression built into them. Interpersonally, that one-on-one interaction. And I'm going to take us back to that 5th grade Tanya who said, there's no way that black people were senators. It's happening internally. It's that internalized place. I had taken in my oppression so much as a 5th grader, this is 10, 11 years old, that there's no way that black people were senators, because I believed the lack and the mentality of lack of worth. And I had internalized it in such a way that I was just acting it out. How have we internalized our oppression from both our marginalized place and our privileged place? How have we internalized those messages that oppression is given to us? So as a leader, we understand all of that. Play a little game here. So clap when you see the horse. Clap when you see the horse. And if you've seen the horse, help somebody else who doesn't see the horse. Help somebody else. Help somebody else. So, the water is the mane. The frog's hind legs are the eyes, and the frog's eyes are the snout of the horse. We got it? Turn your head to the side. It may help if you turn your head to the side. So I'm going to help you out. Got it? Oh, yes. So it's a little, so it's harder to see. But I use this with understanding how power and privilege and the dynamics of oppression works, and we will be effective leaders when we understand this. It's because this is actually how our brains have to work. We have to be able to go between the two, power, privilege, marginalization, because that's how our identities work. I am both a black woman, I am a lesbian, I was raised working class, and I now live a middle class life. I was raised Christian and practiced Christianity. There are both, and I'm going to go back, within me, if I go down these things, I have both privileged identities and marginalized identities. And our brains, we've got to know, I feel like I'm doing a dance, we've got to understand how the dynamics of privilege and power work in such a way that we can move back and forth. That's going to have us be effective leaders. That's going to have us be able to hold a campus that is trying to figure this out and do that dance and learn about that dance. But if we don't know how to do it as leaders, we can't help anybody else. So, I think we're moving on to resilience. So we're almost home. So there's a book out now from Andrew Zoli. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the second author's name. Healy, their last name is Healy, called Resilience. And they define resilience as the capacity of a system, enterprise, or person to maintain its core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. I think in the last 10 months, we are all getting large lessons about resilience. Yeah. You can clap for that. I really And I actually, and I don't think I'd had this realization until this very moment, I think we are learning how little resilience we have. We are struggling. I think as a country, we are struggling. We are, and you know, it's my kind of pop psychology that when I go across the country and talk to folks, I hear, and you probably have heard it on your campus, people are in a reaction mode, or folks are in, or in the mode of saying, you know, I kind of give up, or I'm so tired, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to have these conversations anymore. To me, that speaks to me that we need to really work on our capacity to regain our integrity in the face of changed circumstances. On college campuses around these issues, every single day is a changed circumstance. Language is changing, the number of people, the number of groups on campus, every single day is a changed circumstance. And so how are we doing with maintaining our integrity, our commitment to social justice, our leadership, our ability to engage the conversation in dialogic ways? Do we have resilience to that? And I think we develop, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but I think we develop them by developing skills. We develop our resilience by developing skills to be inclusion practitioners. Inclusion practitioners, and this again comes from Dr. Kathy Aubert, she talks about them as they pay attention to and respond to group dynamics. They engage each other effectively, or they engage others effectively. They facilitate discussions and conversations with an inclusion lens. So you talk about building a new building on campus or instituting a new meeting. You do that with an inclusion lens. Who is it going to impact? Who actually won't be able to be in the room because of your new policy? That's going to show us that we actually are achieving the data that we want, because we are asking questions about things that seemingly don't have anything to do with inclusion and using an inclusion lens. They respond to difficult dialogues with an inclusion lens. That is, responding in a difficult dialogue, first of all, is a practice of resilience, because most of the time we're in reaction. We're always in the, you know, I got to react to what you say. I got to defend myself. Responding in difficult dialogues, coming from a place of what is clear, listening, being able to engage, that is actually practicing resilience. Using an inclusion lens to analyze and create policies, practices, services, programs, and marketing and media. Really getting practiced at that. Really being able to say, this is how I live and move from my leadership perspective. That's going to help us develop more resilience. And then continuing to do that self-work. So, courage, leadership, and resilience. We need all of that. We need all of that as we do this work. The most common way that people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Alice Walker said that. We have absolutely, and I'm specifically talking to the presidents in the room, y'all have no choice but to say you have power. You most definitely have power. There's no, you can't even fake like, you know, you don't have power. But the rest of us have power too. And we often give it away thinking like, oh, that's somebody else's job, or oh, the president will take care of that, or oh, the VP of Diversity and Inclusion's their job. When I got to Union Theological Seminary, my first, probably second or third day, first week, there was a lunch for me, and I got to sit up in the front of the lunchroom, and everybody was there. And it was a question and answer with the new VP. And the director of admission, and I appreciate her sincerely, she's like, what can we do to help you? And I said, thank you for that question. And I had thought of it in that moment, this answer in that moment. I said, what you could do? You can actually become the director of admissions and enrollment of inclusion, diversity, and community engagement. I need for you to take on my job. I hold my job, and that's not me giving away responsibility for holding it, but I need actually everybody to take on the responsibility of inclusion and of creating a community that engages. And so it's actually everybody's job. So we all have power in this. There is no shirking power and saying it's somebody else's responsibility. We all can be courageous, we all can be leaders, and we all can have resilience as we do this work. And what I'll leave you with, I want to leave a little time for conversation, is a quote from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly. Now. There's a pause there for a reason. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. We can do this. If you walk away with nothing else, besides the fact there's a difference between diversity, inclusion, and social justice, we all have a role. We all have the power to transform. If it's just the conversation that you have with your family over dinner, if it's the call that you have, if it's the interruption of a statement, and I'll tell one last story. I love stories. My mother, and this is when I was in college, so I was still learning, but my mother was standing in the kitchen one day, and she was chopping, and we lived in Houston, Texas, and she was going on and on about someone who was Mexican and they're driving. And she just kept going on. She's like, this Mexican person couldn't drive. And so I walked up to her, and I stuck up my hand. She's like, what's going on? And she shook my hand. I said, I just wanted to meet the person who knew all Mexican people in the world. So I'm not going to suggest that you go about it that way, but we can interrupt. We can interrupt behavior. We can interrupt our thoughts. We can interrupt the world that we're living in by just our actions, by asking questions, by engaging, by having the hard conversations. It's not our responsibility to take care of it all, but we get to do our part right now. I really appreciate your attention this morning. This has been so fun for me. And that's my contact information. I'm always open to engage with folks. And if we have a little time for questions, I think, or conversation. I'm really more interested in conversation. So, thank you. Any thoughts, questions? I think there are some mic runners that are ready to go. And it can be in reaction or response as well, if you have something that's on your mind. Yeah, sure. Rooftop garden was beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for that question. I got lots and lots and lots of tomatoes this summer. Lots of tomatoes. It did well. Thank you. Other folks, anybody? Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kate Byerwalter from Grand Rapids Community College. I'm a professor of psychology there, and loved your talk. Thank you so much. And when I think about my own biases and things I bring as a professor and that position of power, one thing that I have a difficult time with is how do I make the student who I perceive to be somewhat of a judgmental person towards others in the classroom, do I have a responsibility to make them feel included in my classroom? And how do I balance that? Do you have any suggestion?
That is a great question, because and I laughed because I've been in workshops with that student, so I'm familiar. What comes to me is that, yes, because you want everybody to be included. And and when I hear judgmental, that I could ask more questions around how does that judgment show up? Because there is a reason that people show up the way, and you as a psychology professor, you know this, there's a reason that people show up the way that they do. And so I think about, one, in workshops when I have folks who might show up in judgment or show up as saying things that actually just doesn't work for the group dynamic, I go to a space of, so what, one, as a facilitator and as an educator, I go to a place of compassion, because there's something going on for them that they feel like they've got to be in this place of judgment. And so compassion comes up first, and then I can start to hear what's behind that. And compassion will also allow me to then end up having the conversation of helping them see how they show up. Because my guess is they don't know how they show up. And not that I need to be the how you show up police, but I want people to give me feedback, and so I want it to be one of those things. Like, I offer feedback and I ask feedback. I offer feedback and I ask for feedback. Because that's how we're going to end up learning. And so it's that engagement, building relationships with that student. But my first answer is yes, we actually want everybody included. And that, folks always ask me, it's like, so are you serious? Everybody? Everybody? I'm like, yep. Because we don't want to recreate what was already created. We don't want to just turn a table. We actually want to rebuild a table. Yep. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much. My name is Amy. I'm from Hope College, and I am just thinking through the definition on social justice in regards to physical and psychological safety in space. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to just talk a little bit about safe spaces on campus, the importance for those, for both students, faculty, and staff. What role do they have on our campuses, and how could those be created in a way? Yeah,
Yep.
Please share.
Yeah. Oh, that could be a really long, I have about 6 answers showed up in my head. One, there's language now that there's no such thing as a safe space, a completely safe space, because we have to find a space then that acknowledges all of our identities and allows us to show up. And for one person that might have that safe space, for someone else it might not be that safe space. And so you'll hear the language from safe space to brave space, and how do we show up in our courage and bravery to deal with. I actually want to do a combo of, like, we move in and out of safety and discomfort. Now, there is safety where there is a difference between safety where I don't want to feel like I'm attacked or violence will be coming at me. Of course, we want those spaces, and I don't sense that that's the space you're talking about. That, hopefully, is all of campus. Then there's the space where people feel like they can bring themselves, more of themselves. And that is, I heard you ask, why is that important on campus? And it goes back to earlier in the talk that you're going to get the best of people when they can bring all of themselves. You're going to actually get all of the riches of their mind. They're going to be more creative. They're going to be able, I can think about so many classrooms. My grades in school were so-so. I, on a regular basis, think about how smart I could have looked with straight A's if I had actually felt like classrooms were safe spaces. Because I'm pretty smart. I am not confused about that. I know that I'm smart. I sort of say that in jest. I do actually know that I'm smart. But wow, my whole, brilliance actually couldn't show up because the classroom was not safe. And so safe spaces are important because we need to allow for people to show up in their fullness, so not only can they access everything that's inside, but that we can access everything that's inside. And when we're not accessing everything that's inside, we're not getting answers solved. We're not getting new ideas produced. I truly, truly, truly believe that the cure for cancer is walking amongst us, if not trapped in a prison. And it's because of oppression that we don't have access to it. So safe spaces, open spaces, inclusive spaces, brave spaces, it allows for all of us to access our greatness. And that access to greatness is actually going to benefit us all. Now, there's this piece around safe and discomfort that we just have to strengthen our resolve, strengthen our resilience to being uncomfortable. We are just going to be uncomfortable. I wish that I'm not going to get a tattoo. My father would die. But I would get and I'm a little bit of a wimp, but I would want to get one of those fake tattoos that says, just be uncomfortable. We're all going to be there. It's the nature of what we've built in this country around diversity. It is the nature of what we've built. So the more that we get settled with we're just going to be uncomfortable, we actually might be able to create more safe spaces. Thank you for that question. We're right at 10:30. If anyone else wants to have a comment, I don't want to put you off. Yeah. Thank you again.